Hey guys, welcome back for another video. It's AJ, and in my last video, I talked about all of my anthuriums and some care tips, how I keep my anthuriums looking happy and healthy. And in this video, I wanted to go through my entire Hoya collection so far and give some care tips on those. All right, you guys are gonna wanna sit back, grab some popcorn, grab a drink, because I have a lot of Hoyas in my collection. Hoyas are my favorite genus. There's so many different kinds that look so different from one another, and they're just so much fun to grow. So let's get right into it. This is probably gonna be a long one, so get settled in. We're gonna start off with some of the more common, readily available Hoyas. You guys will probably recognize quite a few, if not all of these. And both of these guys right here are different cultivars of Hoya carnosa, which is probably the most recognizable Hoya species. This one right here is the Carnosa rubra, which is the inner variegated version of the Hoya carnosa. You may have seen it sold as Hoya carnosa Crimson Princess. And then in my other hand here, this is the Hoya carnosa Crinkle 8, which is known for having, gonna have to vacuum, but it's known for having all of these little divots and crinkly marks on the leaves. And that is what separates it from the other cultivars. This guy right here, this is the Hoya Sunrise. And this is a really cool cultivar. This one took a while to start growing, and then once it did, this spring, it just started to take off. I think the coolest part about the Hoya Sunrise is that when it's grown in high enough light and hot enough temperatures, the foliage will turn like this deep red color, and that's where the name Sunrise comes from. Right here in this hanging basket is the Hoya curtisii. The curtisii is definitely a popular choice among plant people, and especially people who love Hoyas. It's a really fun one. It has smaller leaves. They're like this dark green color with lots of silver. They are kind of teardrop shaped. And then the plant itself, I love a big full hanging basket because they have this round draping effect. And they're honestly a really low maintenance option. So if you're just getting into Hoyas, curtisii is one of those beginner species that I would say, if you see one and you want to try Hoyas out, get your hands on one of these. They're super resilient. This is one of several Hoya pubicalyx that I have in my collection. This one is a Hoya pubicalyx splash or super splash. Interesting thing is you'll find these really silvery pubicalyx labeled both ways. It doesn't really matter. Splash is a descriptive term. It's not actually part of the cultivar name. It's just something that you put after the name to say, okay, here is a splashier version, as opposed to this pubicalyx, which is almost entirely green. I have this one growing in leca, just because I realized I've never actually tried to grow a Hoya in leca, and I just wanted to try it out. I had extra pubicalyx cuttings laying around, and I stuck them in here, and they're doing well so far. Pubicalyx is a really fast-growing, easy-going Hoya. I put it up there with Carnosa, Australis, curtisii for those Hoyas that you should really try when you're just starting out. Also on the topic of pubicalyx, this one right here is Pubicalyx Royal Hawaiian Purple. This is a special cultivar because the new leaves come in this really dark purple color, and the flowers are also super dark, where typically you get more of a pale pink flower. These guys just have these super unique dark purple flowers, and I cannot wait to see this one bloom. While I will say that almost every variety in this more common Hoyas category is one that I would say you don't need much experience to grow, the Hoya linearis, while being a well-known species that many people want in their collection, I think it can be quite difficult to keep happy. Maybe not necessarily to keep alive, but to keep it thriving. It can be picky, it can be slow to start. It can just be one of those really finicky plants that is frustrating to grow if you don't have some basic idea of what you're doing. But anyways, this one I got as a really young plant. It wasn't even long enough to touch the bottom of the pot, and it took a good 10 months for me to really see any significant growth. And then maybe in the last month, it grew all of this. Hoyas really like to rest and not do anything and then go through growth spurts. And I found that especially when your Hoyas are younger and they don't have a really big root system yet, they will focus hard on putting out roots. The linearis is one of those very few varieties that doesn't really climb even in the wild. They definitely are one that prefer to trail and drape down. So they create almost like a water fountain or like a sculpture. Like it just looks like waterfall suspended. I don't know, I think they're so pretty. This is the Hoya species Aphanus Bertoniae. There is a real Bertoniae, but most of the time, if you're getting a Hoya that looks like this, it is one of several clones of the species Aphanus. Some of them are DS70, but there are a lot of different ones. They're not bilobata. These guys have thick, felty, soft leaves. Like they're thick and they're stiff, but then they have like this felty texture to them. When you put them in high light, like a lot of Hoyas do, they sun stress and give you this red color. And I think the Bertoniae Af has some of the most beautiful, deep, kind of like maroon coloration. That is one of the reasons why I have been loving this Hoya so much lately. This one's actually in fluval stratum, and I should probably put it into a chunky soil mix pretty soon here, because I know you're not supposed to leave plants in stratum for too long, but it's doing well so far. It's been in here since last summer, and it hasn't so much as lost a leaf. I'm also thinking, why disturb it? And then this one here, I just got potted up. I took it out of my prop box 2 days ago. This is Hoya multiflora. This one, I've seen a lot of people, especially lately with this one, who have gotten theirs to flower. This is commonly called the shooting star Hoya. They have these really pretty white star-shaped flowers, and they kind of just hang down. They really do look like shooting stars. They're gorgeous, and I cannot wait to see them in person. This is a cutting that I just potted up, and it is so pretty. It's a thinner leaved species, as you can see, so I'm gonna assume that it's gonna be just a little bit higher maintenance. It's gonna need a little bit more care than my waxier varieties. It's so cute. I've heard that these are a fast growing one, so I can't wait to see what this looks like at the end of the season. So real quick, let's talk about the substrate that I grow my Hoyas in. And typically I will use a chunky soil substrate, and I say that in quotation marks because none of my soil mixes contain actual soil. It's always like those cocoa coir bricks that you add water to, or sometimes a peat-based substrate, but I'm trying to steer away from those and use more coir. And then I'll add things like perlite and orchid bark and horticultural charcoal. Hoyas love soils and substrates where their roots can really breathe. And this is because Hoyas are epiphytic by nature, and a large portion of their root system would be partially exposed to the air, as a lot of their roots will cling to tree limbs or grow up a tree trunk, and they rely on taking a lot of moisture out of the air with the surrounding humidity. So when you're growing them in a pot, the more oxygen that can reach the root system, the better. This will help you prevent root rot. But at the same time, contrary to the popular opinion, I'm gonna tell you right now, I believe that Hoyas do not like to have bone dry soil. They don't like it. But dense, soggy soil will definitely rot them. So to work around that, keep your chunky mixes consistently moist. I like to use clear containers. And as an added bonus, this container right here has holes all throughout the sides. That just allows for higher airflow to the roots. That's an added bonus. I love being able to see the roots in these clear pots. I try very hard to avoid potting my Hoyas directly into terracotta pots. I used to swear by it, and then I had a big Hoya repotting day this one time, and I realized that those clingy epiphytic roots were stuck to the inside of the terracotta pot, and I had to smash maybe 24 terracotta pots in order to get all of my Hoyas potted back up. And from that day on, I said, no terracotta, no ceramic. I love the look of them in terracotta, so if I want to see a Hoya in terracotta, I will put a plastic pot. directly into the terracotta like that, and that works just perfectly. But will I put soil directly in this pot and just plop my Hoya right in? No. You don't want to let Hoyas get crazy root bound, but you also don't want them to have too much room for their roots. You want them to be able to fill out their pot pretty significantly, because it's once they have an established root system that is expansive and is large, that's when you're gonna start to notice all of this new growth. This plant was pretty much dormant for me for about 11 months. And then once it decided that it had put out enough roots, it gave me like half a dozen new leaves in a week and a half. I like to use a standard liquid all-purpose houseplant fertilizer for my Hoyas, and I know that there are a lot of different fertilizers that people will use that are specifically made for Hoyas that'll encourage them to flower, do this, that, or a third thing. I don't actually have a Hoya-specific fertilizer. I use the same fertilizers for pretty much all of the plants in my collection, and typically I'll either go for the Foliage Pro by Super Thrive, or I will go with Gold Leaf Aeroid fertilizer. Both are well-balanced options that are perfect for your Hoyas and your houseplants in general. These guys take up a lot of energy, not only growing and climbing and being vining plants, but also because you want them to flower, and that also takes a lot of the plant's energy. So you're gonna wanna make sure that every time you add new water to the soil, that there is some nutrients in there for them. So of course I have a couple of Hoyas that are still in the cutting stage, and they have not yet reached the point where they're ready for a pot with my soil mix. So I'm gonna go ahead and show you those. I'll make a whole separate video on propagating Hoyas, but for now, I'll just show you guys the cuttings. I have these in some sphagnum moss and perlite. There's several ways you can do this. This one right here is a Hoya carnosa Nova Ghost. This is yet another carnosa variety, and this one has so much of the silver splash on it that it almost entirely covers the leaf. There's only little speckles of green. It's kind of got like this minty coloration to it. It's so beautiful. This is one of my like dream wish list carnosa varieties. And I love me a good carnosa variety, especially the more unusual ones. Over here, I think I have two in here. Yes, I do. These I'm also very excited about. These are Hoya Parasitica Splash. These have the most beautiful silver splashing patterns, and they have these really cute heart-shaped leaves. This one wasn't on my wish list, but I got this as a gift that one of my planty friends sent to me, and I'm obsessed with them. And they're rooting pretty well. They're not quite ready for soil yet, but maybe next month I will be able to pot these up. And then the last one that I have in here, these are Hoya Incrusata Moonshine. No, not Moonshine. Incrusata Moonshadow. And that is the variegated Hoya Incrusata, the inner variegated more specifically. And it has such a beautiful pattern. This piece is all green. I'm still gonna pot it up with the variegated one just because why not save myself some space? But they both did come from the very same pot. These are two more that I'm like, okay, well, you got some good roots going on you so far, but we're just not quite there yet. So they're gonna go back in the moss box. Back in the moss box. There we go. I'm gonna throw these in here with the lid on for humidity, and they're gonna continue to root in there. Now I wanna highlight one of my favorite categories within my Hoya collection. These are the guys with the big leaves. There are some Hoyas that have really big leaves, and one of them is the Hoya Latifolia Sulawesi, which also has a number code, which is right there. I think it's GPS 8867. Hopefully I got that right, but we'll confirm it. This is one of several Latifolia varieties. There's so many different kinds. This one is probably my favorite. I like it almost a little better than the Sarawak, which I don't currently have in my collection, but this one is so pretty. Look at how huge these leaves are. They're so big, they're so glossy. Like I said, it is a type of Latifolia, so it's in that dinner plate Hoya family. I cannot wait for this one to go through a growth spurt because my dream is to grow this plant huge. Another one that I would love to see just take off and grow ginormous is the Hoya Icensis, which also has yet another name, which I'll have to put up here because I have no idea how the hell you're supposed to say it. This guy right here, again, big, glossy, shiny leaves. These guys are darker. This is such a slow growing plant though. I've had this thing for like a year and it's only given me one new full-size leaf. If you look really closely though, you can see there is new growth happening here. And there is also new growth happening up here. So one thing with Hoyas, like I said, they can take forever to start growing. They aren't always fast growing. Sometimes they'll give you one new leaf and then you gotta wait a whole another month and a half to see another one again. Other times, once they take off growing, they will just give you new leaf after new leaf after new leaf and you'll be like, whoa. It depends on the plant. It depends on your conditions. It depends on the time of year, how much of a root system the plant has. There's so many different factors. Hoyas kind of just do whatever they want. One of my very favorite Hoyas in my collection, and one that I think everybody should have in their collection, is the Hoya subquintuplet nervus. If this guy looks familiar, but you don't recognize the name, that's because this used to go by the name Hoya pachyclada, which I think is a lot more fun to say than subquintuplet nervus. So why they would change it, I have no idea. It makes no sense to me. This Hoya is such a sturdy, resilient, easygoing plant to grow. It's not the most commonly cultivated. It's not one that I go out and I see anytime I go plant shopping. It's not really one that I see anywhere except listed online. I think I've seen this in-person plant shopping maybe once or twice in my whole life. But if you don't have one of these and you are looking for another easygoing Hoya to add to your collection, subquintuplet nervus, pachyclada. In highlight and heat, these leaf margins turn like bright red and I absolutely love it. This is such a pretty plant. With how many different varieties of Hoyas there are, and there are thousands and thousands out there. They come from different areas. Their care requirements definitely vary and differ. But one thing that I have seen really works wonders with every Hoya that I've ever owned is getting a humidifier or just having them in an area that's at least 65-70% humidity. There are others, like some of your Pubicalix and Curtisii is another one that will be just fine acclimating to just average ambient household humidity. But there are others that will benefit so much, and even those easygoing ones will benefit from being in a greenhouse or a grow tent or a plant room that has a humidifier, anything to boost it just a little bit. Hoyas are bright light plants, and I have said this about every single Hoya that I have owned. Really, none of them are low light plants. There are quite a few that can take more filtered light, partial shade, but for the most part, you're gonna wanna put your Hoyas in the sunniest or brightest areas that you possibly can without burning the leaves. I actually put a fair amount of my Hoyas outside in the summer. I don't put them in full direct burning sunlight, but a lot of them do really like being in filtered sunlight where it still shines pretty bright on them for a good couple hours of the day, and then they get kind of partial sun, partial shade for the rest of the day. And it brings out some really cool secondary colors that you don't get when there's not intense bright light. These are just really solid green leaves most of the time, but then once that summer sun comes in, that's when these edges start to get this dark red color. I think I probably mentioned earlier that there are some Hoyas that just grow faster than others. Here are a couple of the Hoyas in my collection that I think are just reliably fast growing. This right here is my Hoya Polyneura Silver Brogette. And this is also known as the mermaid tail or fishtail Hoya. You can tell because of that really unique leaf shape. They're so pretty. This is a really silvery cultivar. You can also find a solid green version, and then you can find some with white variegation as well. I think the silver is definitely my favorite. I'm a sucker for silver plants, especially silver Hoyas. This guy grows pretty consistently. I've actually chopped and propagated it twice already since I got it last year. I don't have much to say about it except what's not to love about a good Polyneura variety. These guys, I also have to start off by saying I've been propagating the shit out of these, which is why they're so small, but I promise you they are fast growing. This is my Hoya Iris Marie. it was like twice this length, so I chopped it and put some pieces in the prop box and it grew back, and then I did it again, so it has stayed the same size for a long time. When the new foliage comes in, these new leaves will start off bright red and then they will fade to green over time. It kind of reminds me of Hoya Bella, especially the flowers, just like a much bigger version. And then in this hand here, this is my Hoya species Aphanis Angleriana Vietnam. This is another one of those species Aphanis, and that basically just means this hasn't been described as its own species, and it's so similar to the real true Hoya Angleriana that it's just categorized as species Aphanis, which means very, very similar to, but not quite. This one is known to be quite a bit easier to grow than the true Angleriana. I wouldn't know, I've only had this one, but this is an easy growing plant. It's got these tiny little kind of fuzzy, felty leaves. At first glance, you probably wouldn't even know that this is a Hoya compared to some of the other species and cultivars that I've shown, but it certainly is. It grows like a weed for me. I have propagated this thing at least 4 times, and I guarantee you in a month or two, this is going to be double or triple this size. I told you, I don't put my Hoyas directly into terracotta. This one right here is my Hoya Gunangating, and I think some people will be surprised that I put this in the fast growing Hoyas category, but here's why. This took forever to grow for me. This I got as a 3-leaf plant in last August, so I have had it for like 2/3 of a year, and it spent a good chunk of that time only being 3 leaves. But once it got established and it took off, it was another one of those plants that just really, I think from here upwards, all occurred since March, and it's just about to be June. And it has just grown and grown and grown. This is one of those Calistophylla type Hoyas that look like they came from like the Jurassic era. I don't know, they remind me of dinosaurs, and I love this whole little family of plants. The Gunang has to be my favorite. There's some others that I need to get. Definitely killed my Calistophylla a bit ago, but this one has been easygoing and super fun to grow. And then, of course, in my fastest growing Hoyas, I also have to talk about the Hoya Buodii. This is truly one of those Hoyas that will take off and grow like a weed. And I'm not even joking you. This plant in less than a year has gotten maybe 12 times its original size. When I bought it, it was this tall and it had 2 leaves on it, and it grew all of this before a year was even up. I can't wait to see what this looks like next season now that it's got such an established root system and it's taking off. It has a peduncle right here, which if you don't know what a peduncle is, that is this little growth point that Hoyas create where the flower buds and the flowers come from. They bloom from the same place repeatedly, but I've only actually seen flower buds on this plant once, which, as some Hoyas do sometimes, the flower buds will make it to a certain stage and then they kind of just dry up and fall off. So I've yet to actually be able to see the flowers on this plant in person, but we got about halfway there last year. So hopefully this season will be the season for it. So you've probably noticed that quite a few of my Hoyas are being grown on trellises or stakes to support upright growth, in addition to having consistently higher humidity. Another tip that I have for you guys to encourage your Hoyas to grow faster, more consistently, produce larger and larger leaves as they mature, is to have them growing upright. And that's for most Hoyas. I mentioned earlier that the linearis naturally trails and cascades downwards, and there are a lot of Hoyas that are like that and don't naturally climb. But for the ones that do, which is the vast majority of Hoyas, they are going to prefer to grow climbing the way that they would in the wild. It feels more natural for them. It's just something that they like to do. And growing on a support, having something that they're leaning up against, twisting up, tells them that they're stable and secure enough that they can put out leaves and their stem isn't gonna break. They're not gonna fall over and suffer. It is just a healthy indicator to the plant that they're good to grow. So some questions that I get asked about Hoyas all the time, this is probably the number one most frequently asked question that I get is, what should I do with these long, bare tendrils? And the answer, 9 times out of 10, is just leave them be. Here's one on my Buodii as well, and you're gonna wanna just leave them be. We were just talking about Hoyas being upright climbing plants. So if they're sending out a tendril, they're just making sure that they have something to climb. I have to either extend this or put it on an actual trellis that I can just wrap it around. But before Hoyas will put out leaves or flower buds, they want to make sure that they have enough space to climb. So what they do is they send out these long bare tendrils. A lot of people will try to cut them off thinking that they're benefiting the plant or that this part is dead. As long as it's still nice and plump and the end isn't dried up and shriveled, you're going to want to leave these tendrils right on. If you are twisting your Hoyas up a support, go counterclockwise. That is the direction that they naturally grow, and they will grow so much faster if you go that way. Also, make sure that the growing point, this very tip of the tendril, is always facing upwards. This will make sure that the growth hormones get concentrated at the correct part of the plant. I also get asked often what can be done to prevent your Hoyas from bud blasting, which is, like I was saying earlier, when your Hoya has flower buds and then they dry up and fall off. Usually when this happens, it is because they're not getting either enough water or fertilizer. If the soil is getting super bone dry and they're going through a drought, they're not going to want to flower and they're not going to want to grow much. Not having enough moisture and humidity in the air or in the substrate that your plant is growing in is usually a common cause for the plant deciding it's not going to flower or it's not going to put out those new leaves after all. These plants do not come from the desert. They're not desert succulents. They're not cacti. And if your plant does not naturally come from a place where it experiences drought conditions, it probably does not want to experience them. So try giving your Hoya a little bit more water and you should see more flower buds, more flowers, and more foliage, more new growth that just continues to happen. I'm so happy because none of the Hoyas in my plant collection currently have any pests that I've seen, but I know from experience that there are a lot of pest bugs, especially mealybugs and aphids, that love to be bothersome in people's Hoya collections. So my solution for that, I have a video which I will put a link in the description for my spray so that you can see what I do, but I actually make a homemade spray and it's so simple. You can use Dawn dish soap or cast iron soap, warm water, and rubbing alcohol. And I just mix those things together in a spray bottle and I just spray and wipe down my plants every couple days until the bug problem seems to disappear. I prefer not to just go in with a Q-tip and wipe off the mealybugs that way or the aphids because the eggs are too small to see with the naked eye. And if you're only getting what you can see, you're missing quite a bit of the bugs. So I like to spray the plant down, saturate it, drench it in whatever pest spray that I'm using, and then wipe it down, rinse it off if it's a spray that needs to be rinsed because a lot of Hoyas are sensitive to sunburning. And that will usually take care of the problem for me. Mites, they're a whole nother story and they are gonna need a whole nother video. They're definitely not one that I can just summarize what to do. But if those are the questions you have, I'm not actually the person to go to. I don't actually think I've dealt with flat mites yet. But I do know there are a lot of people with good articles and good videos out there. I hear all the time, oh, what can I do if it's been months and months and months, a year, over a year, and my Hoya still hasn't shown any signs of change or new growth at all? There's 2 things that I like to do in this situation. Number 1, just move it to a different spot. Like even if it's a window on the other side of the house or just in another room and it seems like it's just as bright. Sometimes small changes in a plant's environment make all the difference in how happy it is. And then the other thing is sometimes you just have to be really patient. There are some Hoyas that just do not grow fast, and there are many others that will not grow fast until they have a well-established root system, or it's a certain time of the year, or they're just really feeling like they want to put out some new leaves. Hoyas do what they want, and they respond super differently to different environments. You just have to be patient. It's hard, it's really difficult. You just want them to explode with growth so that you can have those big, beautiful Hoyas that you see online. But it does come with a lot of waiting, unfortunately, for a lot of the varieties. Alrighty, so I've got a couple more Hoyas. All right, so I've got a couple more Hoyas to show, and I'm just gonna start right here with this Hoya carnosa. It's another carnosa variety. This is the Wilbur Graves China. Now, there are two main forms of the carnosa Wilbur Graves. There's the Russian form and the China form. They've got slight differences to them. This is the China form. I had a couple different cuttings, and I potted them all up together in this pot. They're so pretty, so glossy, and they've got a lot of that splashiness to them. Yeah, no, I really like this Hoya. Absolute must have, just like the rest of them. One day I'm gonna have all of the carnosas, just wait. And then this is my Hoya Hanie Pink. This is, as the name implies, the pink flowering version of the Hoya Hanie. I did take a top cutting a while ago, and it responded by putting out this new growth point. And it's also growing another new vine and growth point down here. That's what this leaf is. A whole growth bud right here too. This one has been decently fast growing. It's been an easygoing species. It's another one, I don't really see it in a whole lot of people's collections. And I definitely have never seen one at a store or a nursery. But if you can get your hands on one, I think this is a pretty fun plant to grow. You may be thinking, oh, this one looks a lot like the Hoya Mathilde. This is actually a very closely related cultivar. This is Hoya Chuk, I believe is how you pronounce it. And this guy actually comes from the same seed pod as the Hoya Mathilde. Mathilde is a hybrid between Hoya carnosa and Hoya serpens. And when that plant was hybridized, of the seeds that were grown and propagated and produced and sold, not only did we get the Mathilde, we also got the Chuk from that very same project. This one has a slightly different leaf shape, and they tend to be a lot more solid green and less splashy, but they are quite similar. This was a cutting in my prop box, and it did not grow for me in the prop box, but then as soon as I potted it up and I started giving it fertilizer and more light, it gave me 3 new leaves, and now it's working on number 4. It actually has a tiny little peduncle, if you can see it. Yeah, there it is. But I do think that this plant is too young and too small. It probably won't give me any flower buds yet because it doesn't have the foliage and the roots to support a big cluster of flowers yet. But hopefully in the future, in the near future, this plant will just grow out and be huge. I know that the Hoya Mathilde loves to take off and just double, triple, quadruple in size in the summer. So I'm hoping that this one will behave similarly. This really pretty dark-leaved variety is Hoya Croniana Black. And of course, again, it has the descriptive color name because the leaves are so dark. I also had a Croniana Silver. I've had several Hoya Croniana Silvers, and all of them have rotted and died on me. It's one of those plants where I'm starting to think that maybe I'm just not meant to have a Croniana Silver, which makes me wait with bated breath and hope that I do not kill this guy as well because it's so pretty, and I also got it as a gift. But at this point, Croniana kind of scares me, and I don't know what it is about Croniana specifically, but I've had 2 I've had 2 Croniana Silvers. Both of them have rotted, and this guy dropped 2 leaves. The roots are still healthy, they're still fine. I'm probably just paranoid. It was probably just because of shipping that it dropped a couple leaves. It seems fine, it seemed fine for a while, but I am a little bit wary of Croniana just because my experiences have been so wildly unspecific with that group of plants. But I guess really it is the silver specifically. I waited for a while, so if you're to this point in the video, here is probably my least favorite Hoya in my whole collection. This is Hoya Thomsonii Pink. It's beautiful. It is a really pretty plant. I love, love, love the fuzzy leaves. They are quite soft, but this plant doesn't grow. I've had this for about a year and it has yet to give me one single new leaf, and I'm tired of waiting. It's boring me to death. I'm sure that when it finally grows, I'm going to just love this plant, just fall in love with it. But for now, I'm sitting here waiting on it. I'm giving it all of the care that I give all my other Hoyas. I've tried all of the care tips that I've given you guys. I promise you, I swear, and it's just one of those ones that I have not been able to make happy, apparently. And that's just part of growing plants. Sometimes a certain kind of plant just isn't meant for your area, or sometimes it's just that specific plant and then you get another one and it's the exact same kind and it does so much better and you're just like, why? But yeah, this guy hasn't done much to impress me yet. I'm crossing my fingers that this season, this spring and summer, it'll do something for me. I'm gonna move a lot of my Hoyas outside and let them just grow with the natural light cycles and heat and humidity and temperature changes that they would get outside, and see if that does any wonders for this plant, because a lot of Hoyas do appreciate natural light cycles and just those gradual temperature fluctuations up and down. Those can stimulate growth in a lot of your plants, but I don't really know what else to do with it, so I'm putting it outside and hoping that it does something. One of the fastest growing Hoyas in my whole collection on the flip side, and I had to save this one towards the end. This is the Hoya mirabilis. I believe this is Mirabilis Clone B, but I will be able to confirm that for sure very soon, because the flowers that are growing, look at these flower buds, will be a for sure way to ID which version, which variety of the Hoya mirabilis that I have. I love these leaves. They're slender, they're a little wavy, they've got plenty of silver splash on them. This guy was just a cutting last summer, maybe this tall, and then it grew all of this for me, and it's grown 3 peduncles for me so far. This one's got some flower buds that are well on their way to opening up. I'd say give it 2-3 more weeks and they should be open. And then there is another one right here and another one right here. And it's just been producing a new peduncle every other set of leaves from this point on. So here's a new set of leaves coming in right here. And this set that's developing, maybe, just maybe, we'll get another peduncle. Who knows? I've seen a lot of pictures of people's Hoya mirabilis and they're just covered in flower buds and peduncles. And now I understand. They're just one that flower readily. Like, they want to flower. They're one of those ones where if you're looking for one that you want to get flowers on and you want it to be an easy process, I might recommend the mirabilis to you. In my experience, I didn't even have to lift a finger. I just cared for this the way I do all of my other Hoyas, and it is just giving me flower bud after flower bud. I don't know what I did, honestly, to deserve this. I bought it because I thought it was Hoya parviflora. I didn't even mean to come into possession of this particular Hoya, but now that I have it, I'm so glad that I did. This was a happy accident, for sure. Just to reiterate, to get those Hoya flowers, some of my tips and tricks, besides just being patient, keep that soil on the moist side and make sure you're giving them plenty of nutrients and fertilizer. I can't stress this enough, making sure that you have good light cycles. Such an important factor in getting your Hoyas to bloom consistently. Think about it. Outside, during the different seasons, different times of year, these plants are experiencing longer days or shorter days and then longer dark periods of night throughout the year. And with that, the temperatures also change. A lot of those environmental conditions will signal to the plant, okay, well, we're gonna pause or we're gonna throw out flower buds. It's this time of year, we should flower. And those are cues that plants will look for. So if you mimic those conditions, or you just put them outside if the weather permits, and you have good conditions outside for part of the year or even year round, that will encourage your Hoyas to bloom and to grow and to flower, and you'll see a lot more of them. And then we'll go back here to my Hoya Sunrise because as you can see, it's just starting to turn red. Let's talk about sun stressing Hoyas real quick before we wrap this video up. When you're sun stressing your Hoyas, you don't just want to throw them right out into direct sunlight. You don't want to throw any plant just directly outside in direct sunlight. You have to acclimate them. When you're putting them outside, you're going to want to put them outside for the first couple days at a pretty shady spot and then gradually move them to sunnier and sunnier areas until you get the desired amount of bright sunlight. There are some Hoyas that really give you these bright reds or almost maroons and purples. There are others that will give you red or pink margins on the leaves, but other than that, they'll remain mostly green. It just depends on the variety. And some varieties sun stress easier than others. Some do not like that bright light, and there are a couple where I wouldn't recommend trying to put them in bright, intense sunlight. Some, like the Sunrise, they can really take it, or like the Gunangaring that I showed earlier. Where is she at? Right here. I definitely have put both of these outside, and they both gave me these beautiful deep red shades, but there have also been others that I've tried to do that with, and they've just burned or gotten this washed out yellow color, and it just did not work. So it depends on your conditions and also the plants that you have. But depending on the variety, you may be able to get some exciting colors, and these shades of red are comparable to trees changing color in the fall. You guys should try it if you've never seen a sun-stressed Hoya before. It's almost prettier than the Hoya flowers, and it's just a great way to get that pop of exciting color for a portion of the year if your Hoyas haven't quite reached the flowering stage yet. So that has been my entire Hoya collection so far. You guys know me, I'm a Hoya hoe, so I'm gonna have to get more here pretty soon. I plan on getting more pretty soon, and I will definitely show you guys in a short or a video my next plant haul and all of the fun plants that I get. It's going to be Hoya focused, so I will definitely have to make a follow-up and be like, now I've added these plants to my collection. I hope that you've enjoyed this little Hoya collection video and that my care tips were helpful. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, requests for a new video, any feedback whatsoever, just leave it in the comments. I will try to respond to everybody as soon as I can. And with that being said, I hope you guys have a great day or night whenever you're watching this. Happy gardening. See ya.